gives me the wings to fly through each and every day, and the strength for every moment that I meet along the way. No matter where I am or even where I'll be, the thing that really matters is you're right here next to me. I feel you deep inside my heart and watch you go before. You're behind me and beside me. You're the waves upon the shore. You're the endless blissful ocean. You're the star-filled boundless skies. You're the yearnings in my songs, and you're the tears within my eyes. You're the light of every light. You created every form. You're the sound of music and the power in the storm. You're my mother and my father, my companion and my friend. You're my comfort in the darkness. You're the voice within the wind. You've shown endless compassion, such mercy and such grace, wonder of forgiveness and the beauty of your face. You are the master of this world, yet go beyond both time and space, beyond the ever infinite, still feeling every space. Your love gives me the wings to fly through each and every day, and the strength for every moment that I meet along the way. No matter where I am or even where I'll be, the thing that really matters is you're right here next to me. Next to me.
Well, I would not be telling a lie if I would say that that song itself was a lecture, a beautiful, beautiful lecture. I love being caught unawares like that, with a beautiful idea, a beautiful poem, or something that just unexpectedly takes your mind exactly where it wants to be, at the feet of the beloved. Well, it's been a busy morning so far. I finished giving an 1.5-hour class just about 20 minutes ago to a group of high school students in New Jersey. And their one question was, how do we stay present? And I went on for an 1.5 hours answering that question and came to a marvelous realization that, to fully explain anything, you need every atom in the universe to pull into the conversation. There is no part of truth that isn't dependent on the other part until you reach the wholeness, the oneness of everything. And it's implicated in all of those things. Back in 1994, what an odd thing to say 1994 and to almost feel like I'm saying 1947. I mean, that so long ago. How funny life is that way. 94 one time was the modern world. And now it's the dad's world. So, but I was traveling. I went traveling, literally. I had sold everything I had, quit my job, and bought a plane ticket to Prague because I wasn't happy. And I decided that I would give myself permission to do whatever I wanted. So, having read an article in Smithsonian Magazine about how Prague was the new place for expats, and that's where the happening scene was. I thought, well, if it's the happening scene, I should be there, and I should get there as soon as possible. I wanted to become an expatriate writer just like Hemingway, so I was jumping into that circle to find my joy. And when I got there, I actually rented a room in a flat from a Romani family. And every morning, the mother would get up, looking exactly as you might expect a Romani woman to look. In my youth, they were known as gypsies. That's not proper anymore. But she had all of the accoutrement of a Romani. And every morning, she would get up and sit at this wooden table with her family, and she would read their tarot cards and give them instructions for the day and what to be aware of and what to look into. And then her family, her daughter would take off to school, her husband would go off to work, and she would be at the table, and I would be there with nothing to do. And so she, over the course of time, taught me to read the tarot, which was an interesting thing. And I asked her, how does this work? What's the process in this? What's the mechanics behind it? And she said exactly that. She said, you see, the entire universe is as it is because every element of the universe is as it is, and nothing is separate from anything else, and the whole is applied in every part. Now, after having found Vedanta, which came about 5 years after this encounter, how stunned I was to run across Swamiji saying the same thing, that the entire past is contained in this moment, and the entire future is implied in this moment, that everything is here and now. And in this moment, if you can't find happiness, you're not going to find happiness, because this moment is where you will always be. You will always be here, and you will always be now, regardless of what the conditions look like. And so our effort and our attempt is to somehow understand the universe, or to come to an accurate perspective of the universe that allows us to see that fullness, to see that love, to see that beauty, to see that majesty and wonder and mystery that's implied in the whole, manifested in this moment, and to find that bliss that the sages say is our very nature, our very own in it. So anytime I start talking, I realized I'm trying to tell you everything. And this morning isn't going to be any different, because I thought about the idea of ripening for a few weeks now. And I realized that ripening a piece of fruit is very much the same as reading a tarot card, that it requires an alignment of almost an infinite number of conditions to bring that fruit to its ripeness. And the mystery of how it happens and the role that everything plays is so tightly interconnected that really, when you consider it, like anything in this universe, it's impossible. How could that possibly be? How could all of those things have come together so perfectly for that mango to become that mango? And so we're going to delve into this idea this morning. in ripening ourselves, ripening the ego, as it were, is where it started, but in the end, the ego drops off, and that which always was remains. And that's really what we're more concerned with this morning. The biggest subject that I can't say a word about is hopefully implied in all the words that we can say. Because the knowledge that we're looking for this morning is an implied knowledge of something that can't be studied because it can't be objectified. It can't be seen. We can't grab our divine nature and put it here in front of us and talk about its attributes and build relations with all of the other things in our mind, because that's not what it is. And unfortunately, that's the reason that we had to come up with a special name for our worldview, to call it Maya. A word that's literally meaningless and yet full of meaning. Meaningless because there's none such thing. It talks about an ignorance, a confusion. It's pointing at something unreal that does not have an existence. And yet that thing that doesn't have the existence is the thing that we're experiencing every day. Because we have taken the idea of the whole and made it separate from ourselves. And now we're busily building lines of relationship with everything else in the universe and getting very confused about it. And the writer of the gospel starts off saying, you see, as long as a man is under Maya's spell, which means as long as you think that what you see, what you're doing, and what you're thinking is real, as long as you believe that that has an independent existence, you're like a green coconut. When you scoop out the soft kernel from the green coconut, you cannot help scraping a little of the shell at the same time, because it's all together. You know, there's no delineating lines. It's like you can't just stop scooping at this place. And he draws the comparison with the ripe coconut. He says, but in the case of a ripe and dry coconut, the shell and the kernel are separated from each other. When you shake the fruit, you can feel the kernel rattling inside. The man who is freed from Maya, the man who's freed from his wrong ideation about what this world is, what he is, what the nature of all of this is, the person who is freed from that Maya is like a ripe and dry coconut. He feels the soul to be separated from the body. They are no longer connected with each other. So this is what we're going to be going for this morning. We're going to try and find out what part of us is actually us. We know that we're not the body, we know that we're not the mind, and we know that we're not the doer. By faith, we know those things at this point. We haven't quite figured it out on our own, otherwise our lives would be a lot less crazy than they are. But this is the ripe human being, a human being who knows his or her nature, knows it to be separate and apart from all the attributes of the current body and mind, but also separate and apart from all of the conditions of the past and all of the hopes and wonderings of an imagined future. That there's a you that's unifying all of those things, but isn't any of those things. Or that you, which is unifying all of those things and is the sum total of all things plus. There can be no limit to it. Eckhart Tolle takes this idea and he says, if there is no joy or ease or lightness in what you are doing, it does not necessarily mean that you need to change what you are doing. All right, that's a very important point. Because many of us, like me in 1994, did I say? When I took off to travel the world, I found my unhappiness sitting on my bed at midnight one night after coming home from the clubs and being alone and having one of those insightful moments where you're like, gosh, I just spent all that time having fun and here I am, alone in my room, with my unhappiness, with my lack of fulfillment, my lack of having a great life, or feeling like I had a great life. And it was sitting there and looking around my room. I think I've shared some of this before, but it's in my mind, so I want to share it again. I came to that conclusion that I needed to try something different because I was looking around my room and realizing at that point, I had done everything I was supposed to do. I had played the game exactly like I was supposed to play the game. You know, I graduated from high school. I got into the college of my choice. I went and I studied a practical subject that would bring me a good income instead of studying art history like I wanted to. And so I had done all that, got my degree, graduated, had a great job working for the CSU in San Francisco, had my house, my car, my friends, my view. Everything was right there. And I sat there evaluating, how is it that I've done everything I'm supposed to do and I'm unhappy? And that when I look around here, I see that I have got nothing more now than I had when I was in college. I had back then that small little jam box to listen to my music on, and now that had grown up to be 2 5-foot-high MB Quartz speakers with the greatest blah, 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 blahs. My little black and white 11-inch television that used to sit on my rack in the corner of the room was now this behemoth 37-inch Sony Trinitron, which took 5 men to drag up the stairs into my home. And I realized I didn't enjoy watching that any more than I enjoyed my 11-inch television in black and white in my room off of the garage in Daly City. I realized that my bed had turned from this little twin futon that I used to pull off of the couch onto the floor every night into this nice big queen-size bed. I saw that my view of the front yard was now a view of the entire Bay Area. My scooter had turned into a car. And I realized, wow, everything's just getting bigger. I'm not actually getting anything different or anything more in my life. It's just bigger. And I sat there thinking, if I keep going this direction, there's going to come a day when I'm going to have a 65-inch television on the wall. And I'm going to have you can only get a car so big, so maybe I'll start having like 2 or 3 of them in the garage. You know, one that I like to look at but never drive. You know, one that I go to the grocery store, and one that I loan to, my partner. You know, who knows? But I saw very clearly, if you are not content in the moment as it is, you might not have to change everything like I did. Because 2 weeks later after that is when I had sold everything and quit my jobs and wandered off to find happiness. So you can find some relief this morning to know that you're not going to have to sell everything and wander off to find happiness. Eckhart Tolle is saying that if there is no joy or ease or lightness in what you're doing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change what you are doing. It may be sufficient to change the how that you're doing it. Because life is meaningful in and of itself if you're paying attention. It's meaningful because you exist. And you are meaningful because you are the beauty that you see in the world. You are the harmony that you witness. You are the wonder of the present moment. You are existence. It is because you exist that your world exists. And when you cease to exist, your world will cease to exist. And all of this is given value because the sages have found that the very essence of what you are is love. A word so simple to say and yet infinitely profound in what it means. So large that you can spend the rest of your life exploring it and still not be able to define it. That you are the very nature of beauty, and your ability to recognize it is a thing that shouldn't be. Your ability to see beauty implies beauty in you, an infinite beauty that comes because you are that divinity. You are that oneness in all things. You are existence itself. But what does it mean to be beauty, to be existence, to be intelligence? How does that manifest? Because we see no boundaries as we experience ourself in Maya. When we see ourself in Maya, the I is seemingly one and yet always multiple. And what do we mean by that? It means that there's a you that you've very comfortably talked about all of your life. But if I were to ask you exactly, who is that you? How would you define that you that's been there all of your life? And you would immediately start trying to tell me about your history. You would start telling me about a body that's radically different today than it was X number of years ago. And then you would describe a mind that's radically different than it was 35 seconds ago, let alone yesterday, or the mind of a child. And yet you have no confusion about you, about being I, me, even though there's nothing that you can point at that has been consistently the same through that entire experience. We have this idea that there's this singular I that includes our body and our mind. But when we begin this practice of spiritual life and starting to investigate things and become aware, we come to realize a few truths that are necessary to kind of frame what we're going to talk about. One, nothing is impermanent. I mean, nothing is permanent. Everything changes constantly. You can't depend on any of it. That's the first thing. The second thing, nothing is immortal. Nothing is infinite. And yet these are two things that we know intimately. We understand the concept of immortality and infinity, even though we could not have learned them from the world that we live in. There is no example of them. We have never been confronted by them. And yet we know them, yet we understand them. So we live in this world of constant change where nothing remains the same. We somehow know a constant self that we can't quite define. And yet, in that singularity, we experience the multiplicity just when you're thinking, right? Just the very process of thinking. What's going on when you think? Who's talking to you when you think? Who's looking at the images or presenting the images even as you think? And why is it that you have to think? Did you ever wonder that? It's like if it's my idea, who's listening to me telling it to myself? Why do I even have to bother with the thought? If it's mine, shouldn't I already be fully aware of it? Shouldn't I understand its implications infinitely already? And yet there's this whole process constantly going on where we as a witness are watching a mind think, watching an eye see, listening to an ear hearing, inhabiting a body feeling. So we can see that fundamentally it cannot be me. The mind cannot be me. If it was, I wouldn't need to think. I wouldn't have to wonder. I wouldn't have to do any of that. It's already there. It's already me. It's my knowledge. I wouldn't be looking at something separate from myself in its conversation. So we've actually become more than one. That's why we see a world of multiplicity, because we have that multiplicity in ourselves. When we want to do the right thing and can't, what is that? Are you one people or two? If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. It's that simple. Well, I don't know what I want. What? Who are you querying to find out what you want? Who are you talking to? What have you imagined in that? So it's this notion of having to find the singularity, not outside, like, oh, let's try and make this whole world one. It will suffice for you, in the course of this lifetime with a lot of grace, to become one person, to finally just become one, not somebody you're arguing with all the time, not somebody you're trying to control, not somebody you regret, not somebody that you hope to be, but to be what you are, in the room that you're in, at the time that you're there. He says that the three gunas, Satwa, Rajas, and Tamas, now incidentally in Vedanta, those are the three elements that create all of the sense world that we see. The vibrations are differently. So sattva is, well, let's start with tamas. Tamas is that inertia, that inability to move, that inability to change, laziness, sloth, negativity, hopelessness, depression. Those are all in the category of tamas. And then we've got rajas, that person that just can't sit down for 5 minutes, just do. I've got places to be, people to talk to, things to happen, always going. And you like rich foods, and you like lots of experiences and beautiful places and lots of colors and such things. And then there's sattva. Sattva is a balance between those two. It's that equanimity, that calmness, that purity, that self-control, that existence. And so all of the universe is comprised of these three vibrations in their different components. Much like string theory, which is way beyond my understanding, but I know that they use the word vibration, so that's enough for me. That as things vibrate at different frequencies, they manifest as different descriptions of the universe around us, the different adjuncts that come together to make the one. But very importantly here, in the Bhagavatam, he's saying that the three gunas, these sattva, rajas, and tamas, that they belong to the mind. I had always thought that I was in them. I didn't realize that they were in me, that they weren't, that they are actually something that I look at, something that I participate in the creation of the world, in the creation of things, in the creation of this moment, that they're part of the mind, and that I am not the mind. So there's a separateness and a distance there that isn't seen when we're not being actively aware. Our assumptions will tell us differently. Our assumptions will create a different world for us. Eckhart Tolle goes on to say, see if you can give much more attention to the doing than to the result of what you want to achieve through it. Give your fullest attention to whatever the moment presents to you. This implies that you also completely accept what is, because you cannot give your full attention to something and at the same time resist it. So this bringing ourselves into this moment again helps us with that unifying factor of moving ourselves toward oneness, which is virtue. Anything moving toward oneness is virtuous. Anything moving toward the multiplicity is vice. Anything that requires oneness is good and positive. Anything that requires or emphasizes difference is vice, will take you farther from the truth. So he says, give your fullest attention to whatever the moment presents. So in this room, as you sit here with this lecture going on, where is your mind? What is it doing? What are you watching in it? Because if you're in the mind, you're not in the present. Because the mind is an object of the past and an object of the future that jumps back and forth between the two to manage what is called an ego, to preserve the essence and idea that I am separate and apart from the whole, and that I is the body and the mind, that we are one unit. And that's where all of our trouble comes from. Because not knowing who we are, which is the primary center of our mind, all of the knowledge that we have is going to be drawing relationships to something that we have improperly understood. And that's not going to show us the world as it is. That's going to show us Maya. That's going to show us this convoluted turmoil of life. So it's why in Vedanta it's fundamentally important to know who you are. And the sages say to know who you are, we're going to have to be absolutely present in the here and the now. We're going to let go of the past, and we're going to let go of the future, and we're going to be here now. And he says that in that, live by being aware of the silent present in everything. So when you go to the grocery store, don't notice the behaviors of people. Look beyond the behaviors at the silent presence of that person that's there before their behaviors, before their actions, before what they're having to take care of. And to spend your life seeing that silent presence in everything around you, and you will begin to understand the nature of what you are. Because the gunas, the vibrations, the changing things, belong to mind, and you are not that. You are this silent, observing presence, whose nature is Satchitananda, love, existence, and bliss, knowledge absolute. And this is important because Ramakrishna says the self alone is real. That you before mind, that you before emotions, that you before gender, that you before age, that alone is real. Everything else is only a thought. Everything else is only a thought. The world of the senses is superimposed upon this silent self of presence. See the one reality. See the divine self, and liberate yourself from thinking about the world of the senses. He who knows the one reality beyond the objective world has true knowledge. True knowledge is an interesting statement. What is true knowledge? True knowledge is that knowledge of isness. It's not a matter of cognition. That knowledge is wisdom, wisdom that happens in a present silence, a knowledge that's based on being love, based on existence, and based on pure intelligence. It's not a cognition. It's not a mind. Think about this for a moment. When I ask, how are you? Slow down the process of your response and look at it very carefully. What are you doing? Some of you will go straight to the mind. Well, I'm feeling a little lonely, somewhat depressed today. It's been a hard time, So you'll go to the mind and you'll describe a mind to me. But who's looking at the mind and describing it to me? And why are you presenting that to me as yourself? Some of us will go to the body. Oh, I'm a bit tired. I hurt a little bit. I just noticed my big toes aren't working anymore. I don't know why. It's been somewhat of a trouble. I'm trying a new medication. And we'll go into, that depends on your age, right? The older you get, the more important medication becomes to a conversation. And so we query a body, we query a mind. Why are you having to query anybody or anything? It's you I'm asking about. But you see, you can't give me a statement about the you that's you. Because the you that's you is the me that's me. The you that you is the beauty that I'm recognizing in everything out there in the world. The you that is me is the you I fall in love with my partner, with my children, with my grandmothers, with my grandfathers. That you that is you, and that me that is me is the same, and it's one. That's where the unity lies. That you are me looking through your mind. That you are me experiencing your body. And that's what makes us different. And the problem with that is that we create an ego existence, a sense of self that's separate and apart from the whole, based on difference. And that ego gets its sustenance by dredging an imagined past. It's defined by yesterday. And it brings up all of the things that don't exist in the current moment, keeping you constantly hungry. But there's no fear because the ego is here. I will take care of your future. I'll make you a great executive. I'll get you to college. I'll get you this. I'll get you that. And so we believe this sense of self, which is basically subjected to the needs and whims of body-mind, as being who and what we are. And we run around our whole life serving a body and serving a mind wondering why we don't know what freedom is. You know, one morning I was taking a shower and I was doing this exercise, thinking, okay, I would wash my hand. I'm like, I'm not my hand. And so I would try, as I was feeling my hand, I would say, mind, all of those sensations around the hand are not you. And then I moved to my arm and then my shoulders. Everything as I washed my body, I very focusedly tried to eliminate that from my sense of self. And after I got all the way through, I found that what I was left with was a confusion, because I was like, whoa, 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 wait, what am I going to hold on to? What am I going to grab if I'm none of these things? If I'm not any of these attributes? What is there in me? And I took it in a little bit of a direction of then moving away from trying to figure out what I was and moving into the idea of freedom. Okay, well, if I'm not limited by any of this, I'm absolutely free. And so I began playing with that idea. I'm absolutely free. I'm absolutely free. What does it mean? What am I going to do with my absolute freedom? And of course, the first thing that comes to your mind is, I can do whatever I want. That's when I started jumping up and down. No, no, no. That's the problem. I am not free so that I can serve a desire. Being free is not being able to do whatever you want to do. That's bondage. You having to get up and feed your body 3 times a day and shower it every day and clean it and medicate it and take care of it and nurture it. And the same thing with the mind, having to take care of its moods and take care of its whims and to feel its loneliness and its sorrows and to be constantly running to make sure that you're getting its favorite food and that you're not eating too much of it and that you're wearing the colors that it likes and that you're wearing the outfit that it likes, which consequently I'm not. But these things, you become a slave to them. You're not finding your freedom in them. Freedom is to have no desire. Freedom is to know that you have everything necessary in this moment, that the conditions of this moment, no matter how the body and mind may describe them, to the soul, to the self, are perfect. Nothing manifested is without love. Nothing manifested is without intelligence. Nothing manifested can harm me. Nothing manifested can change me. Why? Because it all belongs to the mind, and I am not that. He says, to meditate, you should withdraw within yourself. Now, withdrawing within yourself is another question. What does that mean? Because most of the time we think, that means I should start thinking. That means I should delve into my mind. You were just told that your mind is not you. So how can delving into yourself be diving into your mind? What does it mean then? He says you should withdraw within yourself or retire to a secluded corner or to the forest. And you should always discriminate between the real and the unreal. God alone is real. All right? That's a stretch for most people. I think if we were honest, it's a stretch for all of us. It's like, well, pretty sure that's real. God, I don't know. It's a nice idea. It's a good concept. It's comforting. Is it real? Do I live in this world where God alone is real? That this thing that exists purely by the evidence of my senses, put together purely as a thought in my mind, how can that not be real? How do I discriminate between the real and the unreal? God alone is real, the eternal substance. All else is unreal. That is, it's impermanent. By discriminating thus, one should shake off impermanent objects from the mind. If something changes, if something has an expiration date, it's not real. And you'll say, well, wait a minute. This is real. Come back in 200 years, or however long it takes, I don't know, if the place burns down, come back in an hour. It's like, this will change its form. It will not be a pillar in a temple forever. The chair you're sitting in is going to be discarded one day and someday be a rotted thing, gone, completely changed. The people you're sitting next to are going to become a plant, someday. Their left leg might be used in manufacturing a tire. It's like all of this world of form is only real if you narrow the boundaries of your thinking, if you narrow the boundaries of your awareness, if you get the beginning and the ending close enough together to where there's actually an existence between the two, then the world looks like it's real. It looks like it exists this way. There's a wonderful story in the Bible when Jesus is walking with Peter and the other disciples, and Peter's probably pretty close to the way I would be. He's just walking around. It's like, oh my God, those buildings are beautiful. And he says, Jesus, look at this temple. Is that not amazing? Look at how gorgeous that is. And Jesus saying, oh yeah, Peter, it's a beautiful temple. He says, Peter, I tell you the truth. The day is coming when not one stone that you see will stand upon the other. What's he saying? This world is unreal. Do not be carried away by it. There is something in it that is real. It's that which never changes. And I remember the first time that I heard this from Swami Prabhupada, I went immediately to the shrine because I had a concrete test for finding something real. It doesn't change. Okay, this should be no problem. So I went to the shrine. I went there for an hour and a half, and I spent an hour and a half doing the Buddhistic practice of just watching my thoughts, waiting for that one unchanging thing to pass through my mind. So I'd be like, ding, there it is. Nothing that I could think of in an hour and a half was unchanging. Nothing that I could come up with didn't have an expiration date. So at dinner, I told Maharaj of my great discovery. There's nothing real. Everything changes. What is he talking about there? And Swami, very slyly, in that beautiful smile that he used to be able to manufacture out of his entertainment of my ignorance, he looked at me and he said, did you consider that which was looking? Boom! Oh man, I remember the feeling of my head just lifting and the world suddenly got infinitely larger. I was like, how could I have missed that? In an hour and a half of sitting there, my own self, watching everything and looking at everything in the world, trying to find that one thing that isn't changing, and there I am, completely unaware of my own unchanging, ever-present, absolute self. That me that was me in a, 24-inch body at one time, that me that was me before it could walk or think or talk or take care of itself in any way, that me and the me that went to kindergarten and the me that hit puberty and the me that graduated from high school and the me that got my first professional job and the me that went out to the nightclubs with my first professional check, the me that enjoyed all of the things of this world, that me is unchanging. It has always been me, and I'm always very comfortable in me, in I. I always know what I'm talking about when I say I. So find that you that doesn't change. In the words of Eckhart Tolle, become aware of awareness. When you're sitting there saying your mantra as an experiment, usually we focus on the mantra. Usually we're trying to say the mantra perfectly, which is a great practice, and you should, because God will manifest in that. But for a moment, don't pay attention to the mantra. Pay attention to who's hearing the mantra. Pay attention to the you that's behind the effort to say the mantra, that which is listening to the mantra. In this moment right now, become aware of just being aware. Not things, not details of cause and effect. Be aware of only that in you which has been there your whole life. be aware for a moment. Pick something in your deep past. Like for me, it was some of those things I can say and some of them I can't. But, there's this notion like, when I grow up, I'm going to such and such. And I can remember those things distinctly, those moments in your life where you had some little bit of an insight about yourself. And remember being the you that you were in that memory. And come to realize that that you is exactly the same now. The mind has changed significantly, the body has changed significantly, but those things have always been changing significantly. That you cannot be added to or taken away from. That you cannot be added to or taken away from. Be careful about what you're trying to do in this world, if that you cannot be added to or taken away from. The Master says in the Gospel, it doesn't matter what kind of action you're engaged in. You can be united with God through any action, provided that performing it, you give up all desire for itself, for the result. Give up all desire for the result. Then why are you doing what you're doing? It's the exact same experience of letting go of your past. Don't let your past determine your present. Don't let your future prevent you from experiencing your present. That's the same thing as to give up all desire for the result. Bring it down to this moment. Why are you here? Because you're here. Because the universe has brought you here. Oh, it's because I wanted. No, it's not. It's because it is. It happened. Your karma. The arrangement of every star in the sky, the arrangement of every bacteria in the carpet, the distant molecules and waves of the ocean, all of them are where they are because you are where you are. And all of that has brought you here. You, the ego self, are not the doer. Give up that idea. Understand that you are an observer of life. And life is a manifestation of this unspoken whole, this love, existence, intelligence absolute. You are here manifesting love, manifesting intelligence, and existing in the full wonder of that. Eckhart Tolle says, step out of the time dimension as much as possible in everyday life. If you find it hard to enter the now directly, start by observing the habitual tendency of your mind to want to escape from the now. All right? You sit there, I'm bored. Which, that in itself is a thought. How can you be bored? With as little as we know, how can we be bored? He says, start by observing the habitual tendency of your mind to want to escape into a computer video game, to escape into a novel, to escape into a movie, to escape into pleasures, sightseeing, friends, family, all the different things we do for pleasure in a day. He says, escape from this constant tendency of the mind to leave the present moment and observe all of the different ways that it does. And he says, you will observe that the future is usually imagined as either better or worse than the present. If the imagined future is better, it gives you hope or a pleasurable anticipation. If it is worse, it creates anxiety. Both are illusory. Both of them are illusory. I had a really fun example of this. I had a teenage years friend in Germany named Brigitte. From 10 to 13, she was my best friend. And by best friend, I mean, even to this day, I haven't had a better friend than those 3 years with Brigitte. And sometime in the 90s, it was 12 years after I had left Germany, I decided to go back and to find my old friends, because the mind always wants to go back, and it always learns that it can't. But I went back, and I was hunting for Brigitte, who no longer lived in the town I grew up in, and found her working and convinced her to go for a walk with me. And so we went for a walk the next day. And we happened to walk along this road that she and I used to ride our bikes on and play on all the time. It was a very, 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 very strange experience. She had a set of memories about our friendship that I didn't have. And all of those little components of our friendship that I had collected as meaningful and important and worthy of remembering were not. She didn't remember them either. We spent there trying to describe our memories to each other to inflict that memory in the other person. And I thought, how odd is that? How much of my past that I think is factual is actually just selective memory, just a set of trinkets that I've actually collected to define myself, as opposed to a selection of sequential facts that actually created me or made me what I am. How much of this is real? The scriptures are telling you none of it is real. You are not the person you think you are. And if you describe anything to do with the body and mind when you're queried about how you're doing, you're being delusional. You're taking a route of distraction as opposed to the route of presence and being. Notice how often your attention is in the past or in the future. Be at least as interested in your reactions as in the situation or person that causes you to react. Don't judge or analyze what you observe. Watch the thought, feel the emotion, observe the reaction. Don't make a personal problem out of them. Don't mix me and mine into the thoughts of your mind, and you'll be free. See a thought as a thought. See a condition as a condition. And do not attach me and mine to any of it. That's the trick. I had a very fun experience the first time that I tried to do this. I was reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki. And in there I was trying to do that Buddhist practice of letting things pass through my mind without doing anything, just being aware of watching my mind, being aware of the witness, and letting these things pass. And I tell you, I did it for quite some time before I actually felt like I was getting anywhere near actually just watching and not having an opinion about everything that I was seeing or wanting to think more about an idea that was presenting, but just to let them go, let them come and let them go. And when I had finally, I won't say I did it because that would take lifetimes to master, I would imagine, but I got into a sense where I started to become aware of a bliss that was behind it. The kind of joy that was sort of becoming more and more apparent to me, the more I was distancing myself between the contents of my mind and me. And I was doing great at that and enjoying it until I became aware of that bliss. And the thought went through my mind, I'm having a great meditation. And that I, at the beginning, ruined the entire thing. Because as soon as I said, I'm having a great meditation, that distance collapsed. The noise of the mind was my reality, and that quiet sense of bliss that had been manifesting could no longer be heard or experienced. And I held on to that sense of I and went looking for my good meditation, which can't happen. Because a good meditation is the forgetting of the I, the particular, the transcending of an ego, that letting go of that which is not you. In the Bhagavatam, Krishna says, the duty of all is to worship me. He who worships me constantly and steadfastly through the performance of his duties, and remember, these can be any duties. You do them with devotion. You do them for their own sake. You do them because everything that you do is a prayer. And you become aware of what you're doing as a prayer. You become very careful about what you're doing. And you present it as a beautiful thing in worship. No matter what it is. You can be filling out a form at the bank. You fill it out carefully. You put in all the right answers, and you sign it, and then you hand it over to the beloved, and she takes it and she puts it in her computer, and you have worshipped, because in the moment you did the thing for its own sake, as an offering in the best way that you could, and you offered it to love. That was your experience. Somehow you managed to get a check at the end of the day. Somehow the result came to you. But you live in the moment, doing whatever you're doing for the sake of love, for the propagation of intelligence, for the pure wonder of existence. Everything is done carefully, with great attention, and everything is offered and let go of as you move to the next thing that's presented by the moment. And you stay present in the moment, making your offerings to the beloved again and again and again, without attaching any sense of me and mine to it. And at some point, that singular note of bliss, which is your divine nature, will begin to become aware. You will begin to become aware of it. You will begin to hear what has always been there, because you'll begin to not pay attention to anything else, and it will show itself. All duties, if accompanied by devotion to me, lead to the supreme good and to eternal liberation. It will lead you to desirelessness so that you can finally experience a moment of freedom where you're not having to serve something or someone in your begging for happiness, in your begging for contentment, identified as a body and mind that's disappearing in time, that's going away. One who has not merely studied the scriptures, Krishna says, but has realized in himself the experience recorded in them and has known the truth of the self, sees this universe is illusory. You will understand that this entire universe exists within you. You do not exist within it. And this will become crystal clear to you the first time you can recognize yourself separate and apart from mind. This entire universe, everybody in here old enough to know what a tube television looked like when you turned it off? When it just went to that single white dot in the middle of the screen that stayed there for quite some time and then eventually disappeared. You will have that experience of mind. The first time you recognize that you are separate from the mind, that it is not you, this whole universe collapses to a single white dot. And you know that you are not that. Let not your mind run after the things of this world. Don't let your mind run after the things of the mind. For they are as empty as dreams. And this, to me, I think, is why we dream. How can you understand better that this world is unreal than by looking at the example of a dream? In a dream, what's going on? You've assumed a new body. You're no longer the body sitting in the bed. That means that you are not your body, because you have a full sense of you in that dream with a completely different body, completely different manifestation. Sometimes the body has wings. Sometimes it's not even existing. Sometimes it's a man. Sometimes it's a woman. Sometimes it's ageless. Sometimes it's a particular age. But your sense of I is just as strong in the dream as it is when you're awake. And in the dream, you can know it's utterly unreal. In the dream, you can look at a mountain that's 150 miles away. But in fact, that mountain is between your ears. There's no 150 miles there. And yet you will see it. You will experience it. You can even travel to it in your dream. And yet it is utterly unreal. Why? Because the dream is in you. You are not in the dream. You are the dreamer. You are not the dreamt. And that's the lesson every night for you for the next day. You are not the dreamed. You are the dreamer. You are not this small character in your dream. The whole dream is you. You are the creator and the manifester of everything in that dream. Even the people that are chasing you are you. You can see that clearly in the dream. It's your mind producing all of it. It's amazing how much of it you can experience in that dream. And it's amazing how much we refuse to think and understand that this world is exactly the same, no matter the fact that every sage who has seen the reality is telling us. This world, it's just like the dreaming world. You will wake up from it. And when you wake up from it, you will see that you have been something completely other. And yet, in and through all of it, it was you. Intimate and beautiful. Krishna says, by thinking of objects of sense, one becomes attached to them. That's how we made this mistake. We became attached to our thoughts as being our thoughts. We came to the point of accepting the desires of our mind to be our desires, the desires of our body to be our desire. And we became so closely identified with them that we can't separate them anymore. By thinking of objects of sense, one becomes attached to them. Yes, think about pleasure. Think about the last time you had something pleasurable, and if you think about it enough, you're going to want it desperately again. And you're going to start investing in the effort it takes to manifest it. You're going to get caught up in the date that it's going to happen. And it will happen, but it will be temporary. And it will just add to that pile of temporary pleasures that are constantly tempting you for more, even though they never fulfilled you with the first one. That's the nature of pleasure. You can go indulge in any pleasure you want. As soon as it's finished, you'll want it again, as if you never had any of it. It's not like you'll be more full than you were, and if I just do 2 more, I'll be done. Look at addiction. This is its nature. This is where it comes from. It plays that pleasure loop for you until you give in and go thinking you're going to get something, even though if it had given you anything, you wouldn't have to go back again. But the fact that all of your desires lead you into this circle is because you will replay those tapes in your mind. And every time you fulfill a desire, you create a restless mind. You'll create an idea of something the mind does not have in the here and now. And then you'll have to create a future in order to get it. And you'll no longer be living in the present. So see, that's how the mind bounces back and forth between past and present. The past is all of your experiences, all of your desires, right? And the future, all of your attachments, actually. The past is all of your attachments to your desires because you replay them, you live in them. And the more you think of them and replay them, the more the present moment becomes lacking. It's missing all of those pleasures. So then you have to create a future to hold all of your desires. So your future is created of your desires, your past is created of your attachments, and your experience of the present is a constant bouncing back and forth between your past and your future, past and your future. Almost no one is here now, because your past is unreal in this moment. Your future is imagined in this moment. You are, in this moment, what you have always been, that unchanging self, ever content, ever free, and ever pure, engrossed in an utterly changing mind, locked in an expiring body with millions of needs, serving them, being distracted from the bliss that is naturally yours, distracted from the inner peace, which is naturally yours, because you've lost that sense of self, separate and apart from mind and body, that carries in itself all that it has ever needed. For the divine is everywhere present and always perfect. I want to read quite a bit of it's almost a whole page from Vivekananda where he sums all of this up in a nice way. He said, so the wicked see this universe as a hell, and the partially good see it as a heaven, while the perfect beings realize that it is God himself. Then alone the veil falls from the eyes, and the man, purified, cleansed, finds his whole vision changed. The bad dreams that have been torturing him for millions of years all vanish, and he who was thinking of himself either as a man or a god or a demon, he who was thinking of himself as living in low places and high places, on earth, in heaven, and so on, finds that he is really omnipresent, that all time is in him, because time is of the gunas, of the mind, and that he is not in time, that all the heavens are in him, that he is not in any heaven, that all the gods that man ever worshipped are in him, and that he is not in any one of those gods. He was the manufacturer of gods and demons, of men and plants and animals and stones, and the real nature of man now stands unfolded to him as being higher than heaven, more perfect than this universe, more infinite than infinite time, more omnipresent than the omnipresent ether. Thus alone man becomes fearless, becomes free. Then all delusion ceases, all miseries vanish, all fears come to an end forever. Birth goes away, and with it death. Pains fly, and with them fly away pleasures. Earths vanish, and with them vanish heavens. Bodies vanish, and with them vanishes the mind. For that man disappears the whole universe, as it were. This searching, moving, continuous struggle of forces stops forever, and that which was manifesting itself as force, as matter, as struggles of nature, as nature itself, as heavens, as earths, as plants, as animals, as men, as angels, all that becomes transfigured into one infinite, unbreakable, unchangeable existence, and the knowing man finds that he is one with that existence. Even as clouds of various colors come before the sky, remain there for a second and then vanish away, even so before this soul are all the visions coming of earths and heavens, of moons and gods, of pleasures and pains, but they all pass away, leaving the one infinite, blue, unchangeable sky. The sky never changes. It is the clouds that change. It is a mistake to think that the sky is changed. It is a mistake to think that we are impure, that we are limited, that we are separate. The real man is the one unit of existence.
Time it comes and goes, like the rivers always running to the ocean. The future no one knows, and what will be is already in motion. Daylight follows night, and after rain there shines sunlight. After storm comes calm, and moonlight shines into the dawn. Today is all we have. Let it fill us up in every moment. Fill up our hearts and minds with contentment and sweet devotion. And everything will pass. Our tears will turn to joy at last. And the struggles in our lives will be our teachers, make us wise. Oh, time it comes and goes, and the
I can't resist a Hafiz poem. So this one is called We Might Have to Medicate You. Resist your temptation to lie by speaking of separation from God. Otherwise, we might have to medicate you. In the ocean, a lot goes on beneath your eyes. Listen, they have clinics there too for the insane who persist in things like, I am independent from the sea. God is not always around, gently pressing against my body. So they've got several things going on here at the temple this week for you to practice these things. I always consider these sanghas, our togetherness, to kind of be a petri dish, a laboratory for love, learning how to love, learning how to manifest purely as love, as intelligence. And so you can take risks with each other, you know, in being too friendly or being too open or saying too much, and we'll all understand, oh, he's still experimenting, oh, she's still trying. So be free here. This is the one place where you can be what you are and experiment with these ideas of your divinity, these ideas of your existence. This whole place Mother has put together for you. Even if it's your first time here, the whole universe has conspired to give this to you. So take advantage of it. Come here, spend time on the grounds. There's nothing that will take the mind higher than this beauty of the divine manifested here. It's unreal to me. It's just amazingly beautiful. And so there's some classes going on to give you things to think about, to help your mind think about helpful things, pure things. On Wednesdays, we've got For Seekers of God at 5 p.m. Pravrajaka Krishnaprana is doing that. Saturdays at 5 o'clock is some readings from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, also very worthy of its time. And next Sunday, we have Swami Sarvadevananda. I'm not looking at Sunday there. Here it is. Yes, Swami Sarvadevananda on Brahmananda, his karma ideal. So take advantage of those things. Come and talk with the nuns and pravrajakas here and just have holy company. They're beautiful people, wonderful people. And Mother has brought them here, living their lives to be a help to you, to be a possible inspiration, but certainly to be a friend. So take advantage of these things this week. Come and visit as often as you like. And find your freedom. Find your bliss. Jai Ma. Jai Tapa.